Today I'm going to talk about two John Woo Nicolas Cage films from the late 90s and the early 2000s. Now, one's Face Off, as you see here in the 4K Kino Lorber edition, which is just going out of print. But I'm sure you can still find some on eBay and things. But if you like this film, you don't have this yet, I'd suggest you get it quick because it's going out of print. And also Windtalkers, which is this film from the early 2000s, which did not do well. So I've already covered two John Woo films from the American period, which were Hard Target and Broken Arrow. And those were early films when he was still working his way through the system and trying to figure out how to make films that would work within the American system. Face Off is when he figured it out. And Windtalkers is basically the film he made that was after he'd had some hits. He said, you can do whatever you want. So he made Windtalkers, and it did not do well, but it was one of those films that, and it was critically lambasted by a lot of people, but it's a film I think is definitely his most underrated film in the American period, and it feels very much like a John Woo film in so many ways. Good and bad. It's just like, it feels like a John Woo film. So these are probably my two favourites of the American period, these two films. And they're both starring Nicolas Cage, who seemed to be the one guy in America who understood the right mix of melodrama, emotional melodrama, and humour that Woo could do. Like, he was the one actor who seemed to get it. John Travolta was good at the humour, but I don't think he quite had the melodrama down sometimes. But he was still always entertaining in those films. But I think Cage was the one who really got the kind of melodramatic sincerity of Woo, because Nicolas Cage, you see his career, it's also a mix of weird humour and sincerity, and him and Woo just seemed to be a good match. And I wish there was another film in here to do a trilogy of films with them, because I think they were a really good match. But because Windtalkers didn't do well, I think that kind of killed it. Now, Woo did Mission Impossible 2 as well, which looks better now than it did at the time, but still feels like a minor Woo film, but you can still see lots of bits of him in there. And I prefer to number 3, but it feels, it's a weird one. And Paycheck, I'll get to in another video. I don't hate it, but it's a weird one. That was a kind of film where you felt that director not quite sure where he was in his career. But these two are kind of the big praised one and the underrated, thrown away one. You know, but they're both worth seeing. So Face Off is the one you will have seen. Face Off it came out when people were starting to wonder had Woo lost his touch, because it came off the Baltimore 1 and 2, Once a Thief, Bullet in the Head, The Killer, Hard Boiled. It was off a great run, and it came to America because at that point no one's quite sure what was going to happen in Hong Kong. So it came to America, and Hard Target was a weird one where there's lots of John Woo-isms, but the script wasn't great, and Jean-Claude Van Damme wasn't quite the actor that suited John Woo. They tried to make him one of his actors, but it never quite worked. But it's still a very enjoyable, ridiculous film. I have it in 4K as well from Kino Lorber. Broken Arrow was him trying to be commercial for the same team who did Speed, and it's a very enjoyable film, but it is kind of ridiculous. But Woo keeps it going even when the script is fairly insane. But Woo keeps it working. It made it a hit, and I think Woo was a big part of that. He made it work, even though there were issues. But Face Off is where he'd really worked with Travolta, and Travolta was a massive star at that point, and so working with Travolta would allow him to do what he wanted to do. Then they get Nicolas Cage involved in Face Off, and Cage was also coming out of an Oscar win and some hits with Rock, and he was about to Con Air. So Cage was like as big as he was ever going to be as well. So Woo had two big stars who were huge at the time who were doing this film with him, and I think that probably helped, and the studio seemed to get the story. I think it helped everybody understood what this film was. It's ridiculous, but it's enjoyable. The actors sharing the parts basically. So for the first third of the movie, John Travolta plays the hero and Nicolas Cage plays the big bad villain. Through plot convolutions, Travolta has become Cage to get into prison to find out information. Evil Cage wakes up, becomes Travolta, so Travolta now becomes a villain who's hiding within the police to get up to his bad deeds, and now Cage is a good guy trying to escape from prison, get his life back, and prove that he's who he is. And there's lots of weird things here, like there were easy fixes that could have been easily done, where like Travolta's character has this thing in his throat that changes his voice into something like Nicolas Cage. So to prove he's he's actually John Travolta, he could have just destroyed it, and it doesn't. That's the wrong voice, not the face, would have launched an instant investigation. That would have taken the fun of the film, so they don't do that. But it's an obvious fix, and so that allows you to go through this weird story. But the fun is we watch them play themselves and play each other. And the thing about this film is, even though Travolta starts out as a hero, he becomes a villain. He so becomes the villain that by the time he gets his face back at the end, it's kind of just weird. It's like, oh yeah, you were the hero at the start of the film. Because Cage starts sort of being uber Cage villain in a way that only like Chow Yun-fat would have gone as far as this in the Hong Kong era, where just this massive performance, and then he becomes this hero who's very genuine and very tortured. Again, it's like this melodramatic thing of like the killer redone in America. Because I mean, this kind of is his remake of the Killer. He did a remake of the Killer later, which I enjoyed, but this one feels like more of a remake of the Killer for how ridiculous it is and how bizarre it is, and how again like Cage commits to being this melodramatic hero, and all the excesses. You know, it's just this weird, and Travolta becomes one of the kind of woo villains, sort of like Mad Dog from Hard Boiled or something, where he's just so over the top that's really enjoyable to watch. There's less soul there. I think Cage kind of, like, Travolta has the more fun bits, but Cage has the dramatic carry the movie moments, and that's where Woo's heart really is a lot of the time. So it does become very much like a Hong Kong film, but made in America. Just because all the character stuff is there in this one that you kind of were missing earlier on in the American films, like the kind of weird sentimentality, sometimes the silliness of a Woo film that's wonderful, because it kind of is powerful in its own way because he's a genuine director. Even if this thing is not cool and out of step with everything, he means it, and that comes back in this film. So that having Cage talk to various peoples that the other character wronged, but he's now the good guy in the bad guy's face, does have an impact. It really does work, even though it's silly, but it just works. Because it's a guy actually seeing the kind of how the other side live, and how a lot of people he just dismissed as criminals. They are criminals, but they are human, and it's like he's seen a kind of human side of his enemies, and that works. It just works as a very kind of woo thing. And also the idea of that guy seeing his enemy's face on him. It's the thing that Cage always comes back to, is he's obsessed with the face. He's one point just face off when he's in drugs, and there's this thing when he first sees Cage's face on his face, he freaks out. And there's just this sense of him being uncomfortable in his own skin that really is a physicality thing that really feels like very wooism. You know, this sense of someone being uncomfortable in their own skin, and the actual plot is a metaphor for what this guy feels and what this guy was like in the first half of his Travolta. So everything kind of fits in a way that I think it's just the story fitted in with Woo's obsessions in a way that other stories just never did the same way. He could actually stop the film and do these weird things. The way I think in like Broken Arrow, there wasn't any spaces for the weirdness of what we did because this plot didn't really have those kind of moments in it. Or the very minor moments you can see a little bit where here or there, but nothing much. In this one, there's moments where you can actually do that. Just the weirdness of the villain being in the hero's house and what he does and how he gives the daughter advice. Even though he doesn't really care, he starts to see the damage he's done to this family and how it's like it's not a joke to them. So it creates this interesting element, even though he's still the villain, he's still an immoral bastard, he's still horrible. He kind of it humanizes everybody, even though the whole plot's absurd. That's what's wonderful with films is you can do an absurd plot that's absolutely ridiculous, and you can still go with it. You can still do interesting things with it, as long as you understand, have a sense of humor about it. And that's what this film has. It understands it's ridiculous. It plays on that all the time. This is a ridiculous film. The fact that Woo's over the top, this actually enhances the film because all the actions are a bit over the top, but the whole scenario's over the top, so it just helps create this uber reality that nothing quite makes sense, but they've got all these elements that do make sense emotionally, and it just creates this weird mix that we never really had a chance to go back to. Like, he never really kind of found his footing again with that in America. I think because it maybe did the wrong actors. Like, Cruise was never really a Woo actor, in the same way that Cage is. And that was a kind of big thing in Mission Impossible 2, was that they were trying to make Tom Cruise something that it wasn't quite right for him, and it wasn't quite right for Woo, and I think that was one of the weird disconnects in that film. But we then look at Windtalkers later. That's much more of a comfortable fit, in the sense that Nicolas Cage is back, and he's playing this melodramatic character. It's a World War II movie that's romantic and based on a lot of World War II movies from an earlier era. So when it came out in early 2000s, it was old-fashioned and viewed. It basically it was drowning in cliches from older movies. It was a modern film like Saving Private Ryan or The Thin Red Line. And it wasn't trying to be. It wasn't trying to have an American sensibility of the modern time. It was trying to be, what did people see themselves as during that time? Which was a more naive time in some ways, even though there was still lots of racism, bigotry, nastiness, which the film shows, but it shows it in a way that's it is a melodramatic element that does hark back to Hong Kong films. Which is what I kind of love about this film, is that, yeah, there's flaws. I mean, there's lots of things that are, for other directors, would be, no, you can't do that, that's laughable, that we're just invest in. So that the film is, again, like Face Off, kind of ridiculous in some ways. And you don't have the protection of the sci-fi elements that allow for that ridiculousness of that weird cultural shift. I mean, the same weird way as we never kind of got what Verhoeven figured out. Verhoeven figured out that his sensibility in America was weird, and sci-fi was a good cover for that, and it allowed him to do a lot of stuff. And Wu was much more, he did one sci-fi movie, then did one later on that wasn't really a good fit for him, but he never kind of found the kind of modern, like, plotting element that would have worked long term for him to actually be able to do his own films and be successful at them. He was always struggling to find that kind of genre that would connect to an audience. So, which probably was sci-fi done in the modern times, but he never quite found his footing, which is weird because when he after Face Off, Matrix came out. Matrix was over the top action. It was very influenced by Wu. It was like this was a perfect time for him to actually just do crazy action movies. And I think he was a bit bored by them at that point, so wanted to try something different, which was like a shame. It was just a mismatch of persona things, but maybe didn't find any scripts that were right for him for that period either. But Windtalkers was one of those ones where I think the studio wanted more action and he was wanting more character stuff. So, and his character stuff was sentimental, was kind of weird. it wasn't quite the modern American view of the World War II. It was based on movies. So Nicolas Cage's character is a gruff sergeant who is going to make sure his men get through hell and keep, just keep moving and just keep on. He has to protect this Indian guy who, these Indians, because they've got a code that the Japanese cannot figure out. It allows Americans to talk to each other during the battles, and even though the Japanese are listening in, they can work out what the code is, so they can't actually move or avoid whatever the plan is. They're just in the dark, so they're trying to capture these Indians to find out the code is, and Cage's character has to protect one Indian played by Adam Beach, and if he's under duress and if they could catch him, he had to kill him. And Cage has already caused the death of his men earlier on in the earlier scene, so he's guilty as hell about that. He feels that he needs to go back to the war to finish the war. He is a career soldier, and he says of duty about it. And all this stuff's played straight. The trauma of, I have to keep distance with this guy, an emotional distance, I have to kill him. I don't want an emotional connection that'll make it worse for me. And he's also traumatized, and he can't deal with people. There's a kind of romance with a nurse played by Frances O'Connor early on that goes nowhere, but it's there to show that, yeah, for a normal person this would be a good situation for them, but for Cage could have been out of the army at this point because of all his injuries. Instead, he goes back and he fakes his injury. He fakes it's being better than he actually is. And it's the sense that he cannot connect with people, really. And with the Indian character, Adam Beach, he starts to slowly reconnect and actually understand people again. And it's a very Wu theme, and it's done, if you understand the melodrama that Wu's going for, and if you go along with this heightened version of World War II that's very much based on other World War II movies, it's wonderful. But if you're wanting realism, it's not. And Cage fully goes for it. He understands exactly what movie he's in. He commits completely to it. He's playing a guy who, on the outside, is stoic, and on the inside is like crazy. And because Cage has done both, he knows how to moderate and modulate what he needs to do. And there's no real mega acting like in the extreme, but there's also this thing behind his eyes shows this guy's a bit gone. And it's a moving story, and it works really well. There's another Indian Navajo guy who's with Christian Slater, who's also the same job, and those two bond a lot more, which of course leads to the point where they both have to die, because of course they're going to die. They'll get dead meat stamped on them as soon as you see them. Because there's every cliche in this film, you know it's coming, but it's fine because Wu knows you know, and it's fine. And it works really well. A lot of this stuff works well. It's cliche, but it works well. But this was coming after like Band of Brothers and things, which is much more realistic, and this looked painfully naive at the time it came out. Now you can look at it and say, it was a certain stylization. That's what it was. And I would definitely recommend rewatch and understanding what stylization is. Because it's a worthwhile film. It does feel like one of Wu's more worthwhile films in the American period. Because it does feel like a genuine film for him. It does feel like he was kind of a bit heartbroken when it didn't work for the general audiences. Like, this was his, like, I made some hits and now I'm making the film for me. And it didn't work for people. But I saw it in the cinema and I really enjoyed it. I saw it once I saw it years ago again, and in small screen doesn't work as well. But I watched it on the projector this time, and it works a lot better because you need a bigger screen. You need it feel epic, just for the pacing of it all. It just feels like you need that kind of epicness for the film, because Wu makes films for the bigger screen. He doesn't make them for TV, which is why it's hard to get people to understand just how good he was when he was in peak. You can have to see the killer and Hard Boiled in a bigger screen. It's just what these films need to really fly. The good thing is a lot of those films are now going to come out on, I guess, Shout Factory now have the rights to them, so they'll probably be remastered and come out in good quality, which is what they really need. But Windtalkers is really underrated. It really does feel like a John Woo film. It really is a nice rediscovery for me, because I was thinking, I remember liking it in the cinema and no one else liked it, and then when I saw it again, like on DVD, it never quite seemed to hit. Now just rewatching it and actually had no realising you need the big scale, because again, a lot of stuff that Cage and Adam Beach are doing are melodramatic but subdued at the same time, and you can need them in the bigger screen to catch all the little looks and things that was in there. And it's just a very strange film, but it is a kind of a genuine film. I keep on saying genuine because it really does feel that way. In the same way that Face Off feels genuine in its explosions and its the kind of tortured elements of Cage's character there as well. And that was the thing. Cage was the one actor who could commit to the tortured characters for Woo in a way that none of the other American actors would really commit to. No one, I mean, Travolta was more into playing the humour. Cruise was more into playing the romance. Jean-Claude Van Damme didn't seem to understand any of it. But Cage seemed to understand that these were tortured heroes. He understood, he was basically Chow Yun Fat from The Killer, or Tony Leung from Hard Boiled, the kind of tortured guy. That's who he was playing. That was perfect for him. And so again, I wish he was in another one, they'd made another one or two movies, because they had something going there that was really interesting. And I think he was the actor he was a nice person to be the translator for the American audience to Woo World. And the other actors just couldn't quite do it. So, yeah, I'd say give Windtalkers another chance. There is a good film there. It is old-fashioned, but that's fine. You can be old-fashioned. Not everything has to be realism. Realism can be boring at times. So I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope it gets you to go see Windtalkers again. And again, if you want to Face Off in 4K, that's the time to get it, because it's going out of stock. If I'm looking at Lorber. Right. That's me for now. Bye.